and thank you for joining us. I'm Sharon Fason, and on behalf of everyone at Chicago Public Library, welcome. Tonight's virtual program is another in our ongoing series of literary, cultural, and civic programming. This evening, we are excited to introduce an organization prominent in the law community, the Cook County Bar Association. Rise Up, Inspiring the Next Generation of Diverse Lawyers is a storytelling event spearheaded by their lawyers on the community committee. Here's a brief background on the Cook County Bar Association. In 1896, a group of Black lawyers held informal meetings to address discrimination and public accommodations and other racial issues facing free men and women during that time. The group later focused on electing representatives, housing, and employment. Responding to the need for professionally trained legal minds to challenge civil and moral violations of the law and to promote the principles of equality and justice for all, regardless of race, the Cook County Bar Association was born in 1914, making this group the oldest bar association of African American lawyers in the country. For over 100 years, the CCBA has remained steadfast to its origins by opposing injustice, promoting and protecting African Americans' civic and legal rights. Tonight, each attorney will discuss a book or document that inspired them to enter the law profession. They hope that sharing their experiences will inspire others with similar backgrounds and aspirations toward overcoming systematic barriers. So let's begin. I'm pleased to start the event by introducing the current president of the Cook County Bar Association, Canon Lambert. Mr. Lambert?
Again, my name is Canon Lambert, and I am the president of the Cook County Bar Association. And on behalf of the CCBA and in conjunction with the Chicago Public Library, we welcome and thank you for joining us tonight. The CCBA since 1914 has endeavored to increase diversity in the field of law and has worked to improve opportunities for African American attorneys in doing so. We are so fortunate from my perspective tonight to have the opportunity to hear from young, prominent attorneys who embody the importance of diversity in the field of law. In truth, they are not only serving as inspirations to us, but they are the next generation. When we look at what's going to happen tonight, I think it's a real opportunity. I would thank the lawyers in the community committee of the Cook County Bar Association, the Chicago Public Library, for giving us the opportunity to learn tonight. And with that, I would say that we should all take advantage of that opportunity and know that this introduction of panelists that Rachael Wilson will be making here soon is one that we will all benefit immensely from. With that, I say thank you, and I look forward to the rest of the evening.
President Lambert. Hello, everyone. My name is Antonio Lee, and I am an assistant state's attorney at the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, where I handle all aspects of civil litigation and torts and civil rights cases in state, appellate, and federal court. Prior to being an ASA, I was selected into the prestigious United States Presidential Management Fellows Program, where I served with the United States Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and U.S. Department of Justice. I co-chair the Cook County Bar Association's Lawyers in the Community Committee along with Beverly Jones. And I also chair the legislative subcommittee of the NAACP Chicago Southside branch and volunteer as a lead attorney tutor with Minority Legal Education Services Program to ensure law students pass the Illinois bar exam. Today, I'm here in my capacity, not as an assistant state's attorney, but as co-chair for the Lawyers in the Community Committee. In the midst of this global pandemic, the Lawyers in the Community Committee has been very active in addressing the needs of the community. Some of our past programs include addressing voter protection during the 2020 US presidential election, where we donated over 320 PPE and voter information packages at the polls in Chicago. We provided legal education for individuals seeking protection from domestic abuse. We donated electronic equipment such as laptops to close the digital divide in education. We hosted free legal clinics and child support legal workshops. We also co-hosted a regional competition in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. for high school juniors and seniors. With steadfast commitment to protecting the civil and legal rights of individuals, the efforts of our committee demonstrate a strong sense of bravery during these challenging times. As co-chairs of this committee, we will continue to increase our presence in the community and fight against injustices. Today, we want to inspire more individuals to pursue law and increase diversity in our profession. We designed this program with the intention of sharing our stories along with the books that provided hope, guidance, clarity, and change throughout our prospective careers. Our panelists today will include attorneys Rachael Wilson, Beverly Jones, Lisa Taylor, and myself. The literature that we will discuss include the U.S. Bill of Rights, Becoming by Michelle Obama, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness by Michelle Alexander, and Thurgood Marshall, Warrior at the Bar, Rebel on the Bench by Michael D. Davis and Hunter R. Clark. Thank you so much to Sharon Fason, Mariela Colon, Craig Davis, and the staff at Chicago Public Library for assisting this Bar Association with the event. It is my hope that these panelists will inspire you to become future lawyers in our noble profession. With that, please allow me to introduce our first panelist, Rachael Wilson, who will discuss the first 10 commandments of the U.S. Constitution known as the Bill of Rights. Rachael Wilson is an assistant state's attorney with the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, Civil Rights and Torts Litigation Group. She was raised in Texas and attended Baylor University, where she studied film and digital media with a concentration in TV journalism. While at Baylor, Ms. Wilson took the required U.S. Constitution class, which studied the intricacies of the U.S. Constitution, including the Bill of Rights. The class got her thinking about all the possibilities the law had to offer and prompted her to attend Valparaiso University Law School in 2016. In her free time, Ms. Wilson volunteers with iMentor Chicago as a mentor to high school students and tutors law school graduates preparing for the bar exam through MLER. Ms. Wilson, we appreciate your service today. Please tell us how the Bill of Rights inspired your journey to pursue law. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for letting me be here today to share my story with you. I was never one to want to be an attorney. When I was younger, I used to look at attorneys and see that some of them sat at desks all day, and I didn't want to sit at a desk all day. I thought that was going to be really boring. But then I took this Constitution class when I went to Baylor, and it blew my mind. So I started out seeing, well, maybe I should learn more about this Constitution thing. Yes, we took government in high school. Yes, I had to take other history classes that kind of talked a little bit about the Constitution, but we never actually dug down deep into it. When I was visiting on a trip, I found a book that was titled The Bill of Rights and the writings associated with it. And the class that I took called the U.S. Constitution at Baylor was my opening journey to law school. So during the class, we had a textbook, of course, and the textbook went through everything from Article 1 all the way through Article 5. And then it started talking about the amendments. And the first 10 amendments out of the 27 amendments to the Constitution were ratified at the same time that the country adopted the Constitution. That just tells you how important it is, how important those 10 rights were to the founders of our country, that they were so important they had to be included in the ratification of the Constitution. And so during that class, I kept telling my friends, I said, I think I'm going to go to law school. But I let everybody talk me out of going to law school. Why? Because they always said, oh, Rachael, you're a creative. You don't want to go to law school. You do films, you do media, you do news. Lo and behold, I said, okay, well, they might be right. So I continued on my path for film and digital media. And then I started an internship with CNBC, a group that within NBC Universal, and they would send me to court. So all of a sudden, I was now thrown back into the court aspect, the court scene, and I was again blown away. And so I walked into court every time I was going to be reporting on a case that was out, and I said, I need to do more of this. So I picked up my handy dandy Bill of Rights book again and read through all of my rights. And then I took a trip to DC with one of my girlfriends after we graduated from college. And we visited a couple of the law schools because by that time I had said, no matter what someone tells me, I'm going to law school. And I walked onto a campus, felt the atmosphere, saw all the knowledge and the possibilities, and I said, I have to go to law school. Then lo and behold, I end up at Valparaiso University, where I was able to take not one, but 3 Constitution classes. One of them did address specifically the Bill of Rights. And then I also got to take a class in Section 1983, which also has a lot to do with the Bill of Rights. So for me, all the way from the beginning, all the way to where I am now, the Bill of Rights is something that I hold very close and dear. And then my favorite bill of my favorite amendment of all of the 10 is, of course, the First Amendment. Coming from a film and television background, I'm very attached to my freedom of speech. And so looking at the First Amendment, you know that you have the right to exercise a religion that you choose. The state cannot make one religion their state religion. Not only do you have the freedom of religion, you have the freedom to express that religion, albeit you do have some caveats, but in any way you choose. On top of that, you can tell people your opinions and not feel like they can come at you and retaliate or take that away. Even if you're a government employee like I am, you still have the ability to speak. What we're doing tonight is part of our freedom of speech. And then you also have, of course, the freedom of the press and the freedom to assemble with others. So whenever you feel that you need to have anything, when you have a class that you want to assemble for and make a student group, you have the ability to do that. And no one can take that away, without some caveats, of course, because nothing is absolute, right? But the Bill of Rights gives us some unalienable rights that no matter where we are in the country, we always have. And then on top of that, not only is the Bill of Rights so important and crucial to the things that both Antonio and I do, because we're in the same litigation group, but the Bill of Rights ensures that no matter what you do, no matter where you go, you always have opportunities. And so one of the things I recommend, I think it's very important that you know your rights. So you want to read them. Yes, they're in Old English. They may not be easy to read or understand, but there's something that you should definitely read and take in. And you don't necessarily have to study them like I did, but you can definitely make sure that you understand what they say. And then if it's possible, I recommend in college, or if your high school offers it, taking a class in it. So that way you understand what's going on and how it applies to your life. There are some books that I have yet to read, but they're on my list because they have great reviews and they're highly recommended for people who are looking to understand and know what the Bill of Rights says. So you can check out the book called We the People by Benjamin Ginsburg. And you can check out the book called The Know Your Bill of Rights book by Sean Patrick. Some other things that I've listened to through the years, and I am terrible at listening to podcasts, but a great podcast that I've listened to is called Presidential by the Washington Post. They go through each of the presidents. They talk about a lot of the different things that they put into law, the things that they pushed for, the rights that they established, the executive orders they talked about, the issues that they had to deal with when in terms of like the Great Depression and so on and so forth. Also, there's a podcast specific to the Constitution actually particular to the preamble of the Constitution and what goes into who are we the people of the United States. And it's called Constitutional, also by the Washington Post. I am not here to sponsor the Washington Post, but they have some great podcasts if you want to check them out. And that one goes through the preamble of the Constitution, talking about each layer, one step at a time. Cases that have come through the Supreme Court, have gone through the federal court system, as well as different laws that apply as they apply to each person. And then there's also a podcast called We the People, and they talk about current events, they talk about court cases, they talk about laws that are coming through in Congress, and they give you kind of an idea of what you can and can't do and how we can make our world a better place. So for me, the Bill of Rights was not just inspirational, but they inform everything that I do just about every day. And they helped me become the attorney that I am today, making sure that I'm fighting for people, making sure that we get justice, and making sure that we also protect our county tax dollars. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Antonio. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wilson. We appreciate your time and your service. Our second panelist is Beverly Jones, who is my co-chair in serving with the Cook County Bar Association's Lawyers in the Community Committee. Today, she will be discussing the #1 New York Times best-selling book, Becoming, by Michelle Obama. Ms. Jones joined the Office of the State Appellate Defender as an Assistant Appellate Defender in 2019, where she represents indigent clients in their criminal appeals in the Illinois Appellate Court and Illinois Supreme Court. Previously, she served as a judicial law clerk to the Honorable Justice Mary McDade at the Illinois Appellate Court, 3rd District. She received her bachelor's degree at Bradley University and her Juris Doctorate at Northern Illinois University College of Law. In 2015, Ms. Jones received the Northern Illinois University Outstanding Women Student Award. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ms. Jones. Please tell us your perspective about Becoming by Michelle Obama.
Thank you, Antonio. Hi, everyone. As Antonio mentioned, my name is Beverly, and I am currently working as an assistant appellate defender, which is basically a public defender at the appellate court level. And the reason why I decided to work in criminal defense and even initially decided to go to law school was because I was deeply saddened by the disproportionate number of African Americans that were involved in the criminal justice system and the laws and policies that contributed to this reality. And so in around 2018, when the release of Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, launched, I was working under an appellate court judge, but I knew that I wanted to follow my passion of advocating and working in the area of criminal law and in criminal defense. And so I had a friend that had read Michelle Obama's book, and she suggested that I read it because I was contemplating whether I would leave this really nice, high-paying job to work for government or a nonprofit organization. And she told me that Michelle Obama had went through the exact same experience. So I decided to read the book because of that, and also so that I can learn more about Ms. Obama and her life accomplishments. For those who don't know, Michelle Obama is a lawyer. She's the wife to former President Barack Obama, and she's the mother of Sasha and Malia Obama. She grew up on the South Side of Chicago with her mom, dad, and her brother named Craig. She obtained an Ivy League education and had a prominent legal career in private practice and in government before she became the First Lady of the United States. So Michelle's book, Becoming, chronicles her life, and it details her life events and how those events molded her into the person that she is today. And so I want to share 3 points that I got from the book that helped me navigate my legal career. And I want to preface that by saying I didn't know what to expect when I first started to read the book. I assumed that I was going to get a lot of information about her career, get some career advice and some personal development tips or professional development tips. But one thing that consistently stuck out to me as I was reading is the word determination and Michelle's determination and perseverance throughout her life. And so the first point that I want to make is that Michelle Obama was determined to reach her goals and meet her accomplishments against her circumstances. So she talks about how she grew up on the South Side of Chicago and how she grew up in a unique time period where in her early childhood years, her neighborhood was very diverse as far as race and economic status amongst her neighbors. And then throughout the years, as she grew up, she saw her neighborhood change to become predominantly African-American. She saw her school systems diminish in quality, the neighborhood diminish in quality, violence increase in her neighborhood, and how she was able to still push through, even though statistics were telling her that based off of her race, her gender, where she came from, her environment, that she would not be able to go to law school and become a lawyer and have this prominent legal career. So that resonated with me because as Michelle Obama being a Black woman, I can identify as me also being a Black woman, feeling like the odds are against me, growing up, coming from a family and coming from parents who were not college educated, and the odds were, and the statistics were saying that someone like me, from where I came from and what I look like in my background, would not be the person who would, go on to go to college and go to law school and to work under a judge and to follow my passion and do what I do now, which is working as a public defender. And the takeaway that I want to give to everyone is to not allow your circumstances to define you or your goals and your purpose in life. And that no matter what you think your background is or where you come from, that anything is possible, and to not let your circumstances deter you from what your life goals are. And so that would be the first point from the book. The second point that I want to mention is that Michelle Obama was determined against other people's opinions. There was a part in the book where she talked about visiting Princeton University. Her brother was going to school there at the time. It's an Ivy League school. And she went to speak with a college counselor, and the college counselor told her that she wasn't Princeton material. And so despite what that college counselor told her, she applied anyway and she got in, and that's where the university where she received her undergraduate degree from. And then there was also a moment where she talks in the book about while she is at Princeton, how there was this kind of implicit idea in the background of all the students that certain minority people were there because of affirmative action, and that there was this idea that she wasn't meant to be there because that she was only there because of affirmative action. And so despite what other people were telling her that she could not do, she did it anyway. I don't want to say she decided to prove them wrong, because there were times in the book where she says, like, she didn't even go back to the college counselor and say anything to the woman, but it was more so about herself and her proving to herself that she could do it. And that also resonated with me, because I have had moments where people have told me or tried to dissuade me from going to law school, and people that have told me that, no, this isn't the path that's meant for you. Or even being in law school, I remember, and this is probably similar experience for minorities in other law schools as well, but having people think that you're there because of, affirmative action, and that you're not truly there based off of your abilities and your merit. And so I have experienced that. And so to read that really helped, and to know that Michelle Obama continued on to work hard and to still graduate from law school and have a prominent legal career, despite what other people were saying, that really resonated with me and helped me in my in those moments where I felt like other people's opinions were weighing me down. And so the takeaway from that would be to try not to let other people's opinions dissuade you from what you're trying to accomplish in your life. And that's not to say that, if any negative thought that, or any negative opinion that anybody has, to just throw it out. I think it's also important to recognize that there is such thing as constructive criticism. But the point is to listen to the feedback and take what you think would be good for you and beneficial for you, and to discard of the rest, and to not let other people's opinions stop you from accomplishing what you want to accomplish in life. And then the last point, the third point that I got from Michelle's memoir is that she was determined even against her own negative thinking. There were times in the book, I know she talks about when she was in high school and she was a freshman going to Whitney Young High School, and how there were a lot of students there who appeared to be smarter than her. And there were those that seemed to, what she called having this, being able to have this effortless success. And how a lot of times throughout the book, she talks about in her mind, asking herself constantly, am I enough? And how she did not allow the negative thoughts in her head to stop her. She talks about how she just continued to work hard and to do her best. And that in doing her best, she ended up being at the top of her class in high school. And as we talked about, her going to Princeton and then going on to law school. And so that also inspired me, because I am a person who constantly deals with negative thoughts and limiting beliefs, and having to fight back on the thoughts of, like, can I do this? Am I good enough to do this? All the negative things that will flood in my head, and just trying to remain positive, to replace those thoughts with positive thoughts, and to push through and tell myself, like, no, like I can do this. I am enough. This is possible. And so I would also just impart that on to everyone else by saying that we all have negative thoughts that pop in our head, and limiting beliefs that pop in our head, but to try not to let those thoughts stop you, completely derail you from what you're trying to accomplish and what you want to do in life. And to try to remain positive, get help if you feel like you need help, and to try not to let those thoughts deter you from your goals and your purpose. And so I want to read a quote from her book where that really helped me. And she says, Michelle Obama stated, "What I've learned is this: all of them, accomplished people, have had doubters. Some continue to have roaring stadium-sized collections of critics and naysayers who will shout, 'I told you so,' at every little misstep or mistake. The noise doesn't go away, but the most successful people I know have figured out how to live with it, to lean on the people who believe in them, and to push onward with their goals." And so I just impart that to all of you, that the book Becoming has taught me about perseverance and determination, despite of my circumstances, other people's opinions, and even my own limiting beliefs. And I encourage any of you that feel like you're interested in learning more about Michelle Obama's determination, or if that's something that you feel like you similarly struggle with or would like some encouragement on, to pick up Michelle Obama's book, Becoming. Thank you. Back to you, Antonio.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jones. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your perspective on perseverance and determination. I think that we can all use that. Today, my book that I would like to discuss is The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration, and the Age of Colorblindness by Michelle Alexander. This book is widely respected and known as the catalyst in articulating the issues surrounding mass incarceration. I often recommend this book to many of my friends and colleagues because it's a hard pill to swallow, but it's strong medicine. This book is important because it opened my eyes to systemic issues that, to me, were quite normal and accepted. I just said, that's the way how things are growing up. After reading this book, I learned to use every opportunity to help and motivate those around me, whether it's taking pro bono cases or even mentoring younger individuals. The small efforts help. It also really grounded my purpose in pursuing civil rights cases and my drive to serving my community. So before I jump into the book, I would like to tell you a little bit about my journey towards becoming a lawyer. I was born and raised on the South Side of Chicago. I was the first college graduate in my family, the first person to complete post-secondary education, and the first lawyer in my family. Yet during my adolescent years, I didn't have any professional mentors. Many of my family members had run-ins with the law. These issues became quite normal to me. In fact, the only type of lawyer that I wanted to become was a criminal defense attorney. I didn't have any perspective or any knowledge of the various types of attorneys out there or their respective practices. And if you were to ask me what's the first image that came to my mind of what an attorney looks like, it would be a white older male. I never saw a lawyer that looked like myself growing up, especially meeting one or even talking to one to learn about their journey. So I didn't read The New Jim Crow until after I became a lawyer. Prior to reading this book, I never studied in depth how the laws and certain policies had disproportionate effects on Black and Brown individuals, or how so many disproportionate Black and Brown people ended up in the criminal justice system. If you look around, the same issues are still present today in our community. With respect to gun violence, there were 461 shootings reported in July of this year, which is a 15% increase from last year. Chicago continues to outpace last year's shootings and homicide totals. There was one report that stated almost half of Chicago 20 to 24-year-old Black males were either out of school or out of work. Chicago youth unemployment rates hit African Americans the hardest. It has been reported that more African Americans are out of school and out of work than among any other racial group in Chicago. But everyone keeps asking the same questions. Why is this happening? More importantly, what are the solutions? How can we stop this? What is wrong with our youth today? Where are their role models? However, I believe before we search for solutions, you must understand the problem. This book introduces the history regarding the evolution of issues related to mass incarceration. I want to provide that context to you today. The original Jim Crow laws after slavery ended promoted racial discrimination in public housing, employment, voting, and education. The powerful civil rights struggles in the 1950s and 1960s seemingly ended the Jim Crow era. However, this book demonstrates that the racial caste system has not ended. It has simply been redesigned. And in reading this book, I asked a couple of my friends to read it with me, and we had a questionnaire. And I asked everyone, do you believe that there's a racial caste system today? And I was one of the people who didn't believe it. Everything was just normal to me, and you could ultimately change your circumstances, but I didn't understand the things that's happening in the background that's preventing a lot of people from progressing forward. More African Americans are under control of the criminal justice system today in prison or jail, on probation or parole than ever enslaved in 1850. The war on drugs has led to a direct increase in the incarceration of predominantly Black and brown young men in the United States. The Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986, for example, included far more severe punishment for distribution of crack associated with Blacks than powder cocaine associated with whites. The US has the highest rate of incarceration, the majority of whom are Black men. Studies show that people of all colors use and sell illegal drugs at very similar rates. The difference is that whites are not arrested for these crimes at the same rates as minorities, nor are their lives as severely impacted by a criminal record. Since more people of color than whites are made felons by the entire system of mass incarceration, Michelle Alexander explains racial discrimination remains as powerful as it was under slavery or under the post-slavery era of Jim Crow segregation. This topic of mass incarceration and over-policing are widely acknowledged. However, let's discuss the correlation between imprisonment and silence. In our society, imprisonment is considered so shameful that many people avoid talking about it, even within their families. Mass incarceration and its effects have often led to feelings of shame and self-hate if someone is labeled a criminal. In turn, these feelings of shame and self-hate are part of the reason people do not speak to each other about the impact of incarceration on their families and their lives. In this book, Michelle notes, even in communities devastated by mass incarceration, many people struggling to cope with the stigma of imprisonment have no idea that their neighbors are struggling with the same grief, the same shame and isolation. So what she's saying is this is a huge problem going on, but no one is talking about it. There's a silence around it. Michelle wrote, even in church, a place where many people seek solace in times of grief and sorrow, families of prisoners often keep secret the imprisonment of their children or relatives. Far from being a place of comfort and refuge, churches can be a place where judgment, shame, and contempt are felt most acutely. Michelle discusses the issues related to social silence. She wrote, the silence driven by stigma and fear and shame results in a repression of public thought, a collective denial of lived experience. As David Brahman puts it, by forcing out the public view that struggles that these families face in the most simple and fundamental acts, living together and caring for one another, this broader social silence makes it seem as though ghetto families simply are that way, broken, valueless, irreparable. It makes community healing and collective political action next to impossible. That is the power of silence addressing this issue. And that is something that I thought that needs to be amplified amongst our community. Because how are we going to solve the issue if we don't talk about it? With this in mind, I implore you to always use your voice and speak on these issues of social justice in order to make a difference. Always be an ear to those that need help and always provide a hand to those in need of assistance. And more importantly, be a voice to the voiceless. Lastly, I want to discuss the bird cage metaphor. I learned that nothing is too small to help stop this cycle. Whether it's taking a pro bono case to addressing housing discrimination, to setting up a mentor program with at-risk youth, there are ways to get involved and address the issues of mass incarceration. Michelle talks about this theorist named Iris Marion Young, who relied on the bird cage metaphor. Michelle wrote, if one thinks about racism by examining only one wire of the cage or one form of disadvantage, it is difficult to understand how and why the bird is trapped. Only a large number of wires arranged in a specific way and connected to one another serve to enclose the bird and to ensure that it cannot escape. What is particularly important to keep in mind is that any given wire of the cage may or may not be specifically developed for the purpose of trapping the bird, yet it still operates to restrict its freedom. By that same token, not every aspect of the racial caste system needs to be developed for the specific purpose of controlling Black people in order for it to operate to trap them at the bottom of the racial hierarchy. I often think about the bird cage metaphor in the context of lack of funding, certain issues like lack of funding for education or lack of electronic equipment for children of color, which created the digital divide. What about housing discrimination against individuals with criminal backgrounds, or employment discrimination with people with criminal backgrounds, against people with criminal backgrounds? What about voter suppression? Or the countless other issues that operate as one of the wires that keep the birds trapped? Michelle wrote, in a system of mass incarceration, a wide variety of laws, institutions, and practices trap African Americans in a virtual cage. She also wrote, it is far more convenient to imagine that a majority of young African American men in urban areas freely choose a life of crime than to accept the real possibility that their lives were structured in a way that virtually guaranteed their early admission into a system from which they can never escape. That is a hard pill to swallow, ladies and gentlemen. That is the truth. So when we talk about the solutions and when we talk about the problems, we have to analyze it from various different roles, from different aspects in order to get a gainful solution. And we have to face the truth. So my question to you is, what role will you play in helping to solve this issue? As I come before you today, I want you to know that you can make a difference in today's society. There is hope because you are our future. You can take a stand and help address these issues. After reading this book, I was very inspired. I went out to do many things, such as drafting legislation to prevent employment discrimination against people with criminal backgrounds. I also volunteered to mentor with at-risk youth and designed a mentorship program. I also volunteer with other organizations with the line of these purposes. But the thing is, you have to act, you have to get involved, you have to use your voice. In closing, I want you to remember that where you start does not determine where you will end. Remember that the history that brought us here to today will not prevent us from moving forward, because we can do and provide actions to move forward. Remember that there are lawyers who look like you, who came from similar circumstances where you are now, who defied those odds and demonstrated success in their careers. Remember that you are not alone and that you can succeed and become a lawyer. And most importantly, remember who you are. Don't forget your values, your morals, and your purpose in life. And with that, I'd like to introduce our next panelist, the esteemed Lisa Taylor, who will discuss the book Thurgood Marshall, Warrior at the Bench, Warrior at the Bar and Rebel on the Bench by Michael D. Davis, Hunter R. Clark. Ms. Taylor is an experienced trial attorney on the defense and plaintiff sides in civil rights, personal injury, and coverage matters. She has federal and state court trial experience and has taken hundreds of depositions of experts in various areas of expertise. She was appointed by former Mayor Richard M. Daley to sit on the City of Chicago Board of Ethics and served until 2012. Excuse me, 2012. She also served as a volunteer with Cook County CASA program helping children in foster care. Ms. Taylor received her law degree from the John Marshall Law School, now known as UIC Law, and her bachelor's degree from Augustina College. Thank you, Ms. Taylor, for joining us today.
Thank you, Mr. Lee, for that nice introduction, and good evening, everyone. So I chose Thurgood Marshall to talk about because I wish I really could articulate for everyone when I knew I wanted to be a judge. See, I never wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a judge. And I figured that, oh, I've got to be a lawyer first before I can be a judge. So reading this particular book, and I must say, the Chicago Public Library, everybody needs a library card. So reading this particular book, though, was very moving for me as a lawyer, because my whole philosophy for my 20+ year career has been, to whom much is given, much is required. And the book showed that Thurgood Marshall, who was our country's first African-American Supreme Court justice, really understood what that meant in the context of the Constitution, going back to Ms. Wilson's presentation on the Bill of Rights and the interpretation of the Constitution from a perspective of the founders of our country. Similarly, as Ms. Jones spoke about in reviewing her book, the just overt racism that he faced, where he would go to southern states and be called the, quote, N-word to his face, or be told that he would be run out of town because he was going all over the South looking for people and cases that he could appeal to the Supreme Court to help change the law and to make equality a vision and a possibility for all people, because we are proposed to have equal protection of the law. I personally volunteer for the different bar associations, Lawyers in the Classroom program. So this brings the knowledge of the law and scenarios to students who may not see a lawyer. As Mr. Lee mentioned, he didn't know any lawyers in his community. Similarly, I work with another organization called Administer Justice, and they provide legal services for free to people who cannot afford an attorney. So I do that where they come and they talk about their issue. I'm very fortunate in that I've practiced every area of law except bankruptcy and divorce. So again, with regard to Thurgood Marshall being a warrior at the bar and a rebel on the bench, the book talked about how he got to the position of Supreme Court Justice. And what's important, and I think ties all of the discussion this evening together, is the fact that Justice Marshall, as an attorney for the NAACP, argued the case of Brown versus Board of Education. That is the Supreme Court decision that essentially overturned the concept and the rule of law that said separate but equal accommodations were okay. Unfortunately, more than 100 years later, we are still grappling with those issues with regard to equal access to education, equal access to the law. So that ties in all of the materials that the panel has presented this evening. And Justice Marshall was a staunch advocate for equality, and he knew that education was the first way that everyone, people who had been slaves or were children of slaves or grandchildren of slaves, would have equal opportunity and access. The other thing that was very important was suffrage, or the right to vote. And so again, he traveled throughout the South and of course also the North, using different cases and pooling them together to find the best case to present so that it could go up to the Supreme Court, which is the highest court of our land. If you've never seen a lawyer in practice, I invite you to go to the Illinois court website. If you go to www.illinoiscourts.gov, you are able to access the Illinois Supreme Court's schedule and recordings of arguments. So you will hear different attorneys present different issues that could possibly impact you as an Illinois citizen. I don't want to use too much additional time, so I want to wrap up my comments by saying to you, I am a lady of a certain age, so I really wish I could tell you when I knew that I wanted to be a judge, but I will say to you that the law has many careers to offer, and I hope that the presentation this evening has provided you with some options. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, Beverly, and Antonio, and Rachel. Your stories were so passionate and inspiring, and you shared some empowering books. So that's all the time we have this evening. The books discussed in tonight's discussion are available at the Chicago Public Library. We welcome you to visit our spaces in person or online to read and discover many similar titles. If you're interested in purchasing them, we encourage you to visit one of Chicago's many independent bookstores. Tonight's program will be available on the Chicago Public Library YouTube page. If you know of people or organizations that would be interested but were unable to join us tonight, please invite them to watch it on demand. And please visit the Chicago Public Library website for many more upcoming virtual events at chipublib.org. Thank you, panelists and audience, for joining us. Have a great night and stay well.